The sun was setting behind the mountains as Jake pulled his old pickup truck into the Sunset gas station. The truck's engine made a tired, rattling sound before finally going quiet. He sat there for a moment, rubbing his eyes. The drive from the military base had taken 12 hours, and every muscle in his body ached. Jake looked at himself in the rearview mirror. His face was darker from months under the desert sun, and his eyes looked older than his 28 years. The desert camouflage. Uniform still felt strange after being overseas for so long. Everything back home seemed different somehow, even the smell of the air. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photo. It showed a little girl with pigtails, maybe 6 years old, grinning at the camera with a missing front tooth. His daughter Katie, she was the reason he had driven all night to get home. Tomorrow was her birthday, and he had promised to be there, no matter what. The gas station was one of those old-style places you see on highways in the middle of nowhere. A few semi-trucks were parked in the back, their drivers probably sleeping in their cabs. The neon signs buzzed and flickered, and country music played softly from speakers near the entrance. It was the kind of place where truckers grabbed coffee, and travelers filled up their tanks before heading back onto the long, empty highway. Jake stepped out of his truck and stretched. His back popped in 3 places. He had been sitting for way too long. The desert boots felt heavy on his feet as he walked around to the gas tank. The price display on the pump made him whistle softly. Gas had gotten expensive while he was away. As he started pumping gas, Jake noticed how quiet everything was. Just the sound of the pump, the distant hum of the highway, and that country song playing on repeat. It was peaceful. After months of hearing helicopters, gunfire, and explosions, this kind of quiet felt like a gift. He pulled out his phone and saw 3 missed calls from his ex-wife, Linda, probably about tomorrow's party arrangements. They didn't get along great, but they both loved Katie more than anything. That was enough to keep things civil between them. The gas pump clicked off, and Jake was about to put the nozzle back when he heard them. Motorcycles, lots of them. The sound started as a distant rumble, but grew louder and louder until it filled the air like thunder. 7 motorcycles roared into the gas station parking lot. Big, loud bikes with chrome that caught the last light of the day. The riders wore black leather jackets with patches and symbols that Jake recognized immediately. He had seen clubs like this before, usually in towns near military bases. They called themselves motorcycle clubs, but everyone knew what they really were. The lead rider was a giant of a man. He's probably 6.5 feet tall and built like a refrigerator. His arms were covered in tattoos and his beard was braided with small metal rings. His leather jacket had more patches than the others, which meant he was in charge. The other 6 riders looked just as rough, with long hair, thick beards, and the kind of scars that came from hard living. They parked there, bikes in a line, engines still rumbling for a few extra seconds before going quiet. The silence that followed felt different now, heavier, like the air before a storm. Jake finished putting the gas nozzle back and screwed on his gas cap. He just wanted to pay and get back on the road. Katie's birthday party started at 10 in the morning, and he still had 4 hours of driving ahead of him. But as he walked toward the gas station store, he could feel their eyes on him. All 7 of them were looking at him now, and none of them looked friendly. His military training kicked in automatically, counted the exits, noted the positions of parked cars, and measured the distance to his truck. Old habits from dangerous places. The big man, who the others called Tank, stepped off his motorcycle and stretched. His leather jacket creaked as he moved. He said something to the others that Jake couldn't hear, but it made them all laugh. Not the good kind of laugh you hear at a party. The mean kind that usually meant trouble was coming. Jake opened the glass door to the store and nodded to the cashier, a tired-looking older man reading a newspaper behind bulletproof glass. The guy looked up and gave Jake a quick nod back. There was something in his eyes that looked like a warning. The store smelled like old coffee and cleaning supplies. Jake grabbed a bottle of water and a candy bar for the road. As he waited in line to pay, he could see the bikers through the window. They were still talking and pointing in his direction. He had dealt with guys like this before. They usually picked on people they thought were weak. College kids, families, anyone who looked like an easy target. But they also hated soldiers. Jake had learned that the hard way during his first leave 3 years ago. The problem was his uniform. Even though he was just trying to get home to his daughter, the desert camouflage made him stand out like a neon sign. It marked him as military. And to guys like these bikers, that made him an enemy. Jake paid for his stuff and walked back outside. The bikers had moved closer to his truck now. Tank was leaning against the driver's side door, his massive arms crossed over his chest. The others formed a loose circle around the vehicle. This was bad. Jake had seen this setup before in overseas deployments. When you wanted to corner someone, you cut off their escape routes first. These guys knew what they were doing. Jake took a deep breath and walked toward his truck. Maybe they would just make some jokes and let him leave. Maybe they were just messing around. But deep down, he knew better. The way they positioned themselves, the looks on their faces, the way Tank's hands kept moving to his belt where something metallic glinted in the fading light. As Jake got closer, he could hear them talking among themselves, words that would have gotten them in serious trouble if they said them around the wrong people. Words about soldiers, about the military, about what they thought should happen to people who served their country. Tank saw him coming and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse right before pouncing. Jake stopped about 10 feet from his truck, close enough to talk, far enough to move if he needed to. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides, but his muscles were ready. Years of training had taught him that the best way to handle situations like this was to stay calm, stay alert, and always be ready for things to go wrong. The desert wind picked up, blowing dust across the parking lot. Somewhere in the distance, a truck horn blared on the highway. The country music from the gas station speakers seemed louder now, filling the silence between the 7 bikers and one soldier who just wanted to get home to his little girl's birthday. Party Tank pushed himself off the truck and took a step forward. His boots made scraping sounds on the asphalt. The other 6 bikers moved with him. Closing the circle tighter, Jake looked at each of their faces and saw the same thing in every pair of eyes. They had already decided what was going to happen. Next, the only question was whether Jake would make it easy for them or hard. He thought about Katie's birthday party tomorrow morning, about the promise he had made to be there, about how disappointed she would be if Daddy didn't show up again. When Jake made his decision, he wasn't going anywhere without a fight. Tank took another step closer to Jake, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the cracked asphalt. The big man's leather jacket was covered in patches that told stories Jake didn't want to know about. Prison time, gang affiliations, and worse. Things that decent people tried to forget existed. Well, 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 Tank said, his voice deep and rough like gravel in a cement mixer. Look what we got here, boys. A real live soldier boy, all dressed up in his pretty uniform. The other 6 bikers spread out in a wider circle around Jake's truck. They moved like they had done this before, like pack animals who knew how to hunt. Together, one of them, a skinny guy with a snake tattoo wrapped around his neck, pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is gonna be good," Snake said with a grin that showed several missing teeth. "Wait till the guy's back at the clubhouse. See this video." Jake kept his hands visible and his voice calm. "I'm not looking for any trouble, gentlemen. Just trying to get home to my family." Tank laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Family? That's real sweet, soldier boy.
Tell me, how many families?"
Did you destroy over there in the desert? How many kids lost their daddies because of you?" The question hit Jake harder than he expected. He had seen things overseas that he would never talk about, not even to the counselors at the VA hospital. But he also knew that what he and his unit had done over there was right. They had protected innocent people and saved lives. "I served my country," Jake said simply. "Same as millions of other Americans. Your country." Another biker stepped forward. This one had a shaved head and arms like tree trunks. "Your country that sends young men to die for oil companies and politicians? That country?" Jake could feel the situation getting worse by the second. These guys weren't just looking to mess with someone. They had real anger, the kind that had been building up for years. Maybe they had friends or family who died in wars. Maybe they just hated authority figures. Either way, Jake was about to become their punching bag. Tank moved even closer. Close enough that Jake could smell the beer on his breath and see the old scars on his knuckles. You know what I think about soldiers like you? I think you're all cowards. Hide behind your fancy equipment and your air support, but put you face to face with real men like us, and you fall apart. I really don't want any problems, Jake said again, but his voice was getting harder now. The training was kicking in, the voice in his head that had kept him alive in dangerous places. Stay alert, watch their hands, know your exits, be ready. For anything. Snake moved closer to Jake's truck and ran his hand along the side. Nice truck, soldier boy. Bet you bought this with blood money, didn't you? Don't touch my truck, Jake said quietly. Tank's eyes lit up like he had been waiting for Jake to show some backbone. Oh, now he's getting tough. Did you hear that? Boys, the soldier doesn't want us touching his precious truck. The big man deliberately placed both hands on the hood of Jake's pickup and leaned against it, putting his full weight on the metal. The truck creaked under the pressure. What are you going to do about it, hero? Tank asked. You going to call the police? You going to cry for help? Another biker, this one with a gray beard and arms covered in military tattoos, spat on the ground near Jake's feet. I did 2 tours in Vietnam, kid. Real war, not like whatever game you played over there. We didn't have fancy body armor and satellite phones. We fought with our bare hands and came home to people calling us baby killers. Jake looked at the older man's tattoos more carefully. They were military, but old ones. Faded ink that spoke. Of battles fought decades ago. This guy had probably seen real combat, the kind that broke men's souls. Then you know what it's like, Jake said to him. You know what it's like to come home and just want to see your family. For a moment, something flickered in the older biker's eyes, something that might have been understanding. But Tank saw it too and didn't like it. Don't you go soft on me, Bones, Tank growled. This punk wasn't even born when you were fighting real wars. He's just another weekend warrior playing dress-up. Tank pushed himself off the truck and walked around to face Jake directly. The man was huge, probably 50 pounds heavier than Jake, and at least 6 inches taller. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who had been in a lot of fights and won most of them. Here's what's going to happen, soldier boy, Tank said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You're going to get down on your knees right here in this parking lot. You're going to apologize for everything you and your buddies did over there. Then you're going to empty your wallet and hand over those truck keys. The other bikers laughed and moved closer. One of them pulled out a heavy chain from his jacket pocket. Another one picked up a beer bottle from the ground and broke it against a concrete post, leaving sharp glass edges that caught the light from the gas station's neon signs. Jake felt his heart rate starting to increase, but not from fear, from something else. Something that had kept him alive when bullets were flying and explosions were going off all around him. His body was getting ready for what might come next. I can't do that, Jake said, his voice steady, despite everything happening around him. I got a little girl waiting for me at home. Tomorrow's her birthday, and I promised I'd be there. Snake laughed and waved his phone camera closer to Jake's face. Oh, that's so sweet. Tell the camera about your little girl, soldier boy. Tell her goodbye, because Daddy's about to take a long trip to the hospital. Last chance, Tank said, cracking his knuckles one by one. The sound was like small firecrackers going off. Get on your knees and apologize, or we're going to teach you some manners the hard way. Jake looked around the circle of bikers. 7 against 1. All of them bigger than him, all of them carrying weapons, all of them looking like they had been in more bar fights than he could count. Any normal person would have been terrified, but Jake wasn't normal. He was a soldier who had survived 18 months in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. He had been shot at, blown up, and attacked by people who wanted to kill him just for wearing an American flag on his uniform. He had faced down enemies who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. More importantly, he was a father who had made a promise to his little girl. And nothing, not 7 bikers, not a beating, not even the possibility of getting seriously hurt, was going to stop him from keeping that promise. Jake took a slow, deep breath and let it out. Shoulders relaxed slightly, but his eyes became more focused. The cashier inside the gas station had probably called the police by now, but help was at least 20 minutes away on this empty stretch of highway. Whatever was going to happen next, Jake was on his own. Tank must have seen something change in Jake's expression, because his smile got wider and meaner. "That's what I thought," Tank said. "You're all talk, just like every other he never got." To finish the sentence, because that's when Jake made his move. What happened next surprised everyone, including Jake himself. Instead of fighting or running, he did something completely unexpected. He raised both hands in the air, palms open, and took a step back. "You're right," Jake said quietly. "I don't want any trouble. I just want to go home." Tank blinked, clearly not expecting this reaction. The other bikers looked confused too. They'd been ready for a fight, pumped up and eager for action. This wasn't how these situations usually played out. "Smart choice, soldier boy," Tank said. But his voice sounded almost disappointed. "Now get down on those knees like I told you." Jake looked around the circle of bikers one more time. He could see the gas station cashier through the window, talking rapidly on a phone, probably calling the police. But help was still far away, and these guys weren't going to wait around for cops to show up. "Before I do that," Jake said, "Ken, I ask you something." Snake laughed and pointed his phone camera closer. "Listen to this guy. He wants to ask questions now." Tank held up a hand to quiet the others. "Go ahead, soldier boy. Make it quick." Jake pointed to one of the bikers, a man with long gray hair and a leather vest covered in military patches. This was the Vietnam veteran who had spoken earlier, the one called Bones. "Those are real military patches, aren't they?" Jake asked. "You actually served?" Bones nodded slowly. "2 tours in Nam? Saw things that would make you wet yourself, kid. Then you know what it's like," Jake continued. "You know what it feels like to be far from home, scared, missing your family. You know what it's like to do your job even when people back home don't understand it." The older biker's expression softened slightly. "Yeah, I know." "And you know what it's like to come home and have people look at you like you're the enemy," Jake went on. "Like everything bad that happened over there was your fault personally." Tank was getting impatient. "Enough talking. Get down on those knees." But Jake kept looking at Bones. "I bet when you came home, you just wanted to see your family too. Maybe you had a wife, kids, people who loved you and missed you while you were gone." Bones nodded again, and for a moment, his tough expression cracked just a little. "Had a daughter? She was about 5 when I got back." "How old is she now?" Asked. "Would have been 42 next month," Bones said quietly. "Lost her in a car accident 10 years ago." The parking lot went quiet except for the sound of wind blowing across the asphalt. In the distant hum of traffic on the highway, even Tank seemed to sense that something had shifted in the mood. Jake felt a stab of sympathy for the older man. Losing a child was something no parent should ever have to face. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. And he meant it. Bones looked at Jake for a long moment, then at the other bikers, then back at Jake. "What's your daughter's name?" he asked. "Katie," Jake said. "She's turning 7 tomorrow. I've been gone for 18 months, and I promised her I'd be home for her birthday party." 18 months, Bones repeated. "That's a long deployment." "Longest one yet," Jake admitted. "But it's over now. I'm finally coming home." Tank had heard enough. "This is touching and all, but I don't care about your sob story." "You're still going to shut up, Tank," Bones said suddenly. The big man turned to stare at his fellow biker. "What did you just say to me?" "I said shut up," Bones repeated, his voice getting stronger. "Hey, this kid's just trying to get home to his little girl, same as I was trying to get home to mine 40 years ago." "Don't go soft on me now, old man," Tank warned. "We had a plan." "The plan was to mess with some cocky soldier who thought he was better than us," Bones said. "But look at this guy. Does he look cocky to you? Does he look like he thinks he's better than anybody?" Jake stood very still, not wanting to interrupt whatever was happening between the two bikers. He could feel the tension in the group starting to crack, like ice breaking up on a frozen lake. Snake stepped forward, still holding his phone. "Come on, Bones. We can't back down now. What are people going to think?" "People are going to think we're smart enough to know. It's the difference between a real enemy and a tired soldier who just wants to see his kid." Bones shot back. But Tank wasn't giving up that easily. Had been looking forward to this confrontation, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. "Fine. You want to go soft. That's your business. But I'm not done with Soldier Boy here." The big man took another step toward Jake, his hands clenched into fists the size of bowling balls. You think you can just waltz in here wearing that uniform like you own the place? You think that makes you special? Jake could see that talking. Wasn't going to work with Tank. The man was too angry, too committed to proving whatever point he thought he was making. But maybe Jake could still avoid a fight. I never said I was special, Jake replied. Just a guy trying to get home to his family, same as you would be if you were in my position. I would never be in your position, Tank snarled. Would never put on that uniform and go fight rich men's wars. Maybe not, Jake agreed. But you'd fight to protect your family, wouldn't you? You'd fight to protect the people you care about? Tank paused, clearly thinking about the question. Damn right I would. Then we're not so different, Jake said. I fought to protect my family too. My daughter, my country, the people I care about. We might disagree about the details, but we both understand what it means to fight for something bigger than ourselves. For a moment. It looked like Jake's words might have gotten through to Tank. The big man's expression softened slightly. His fists unclenched just a little. But then Snake spoke up again. Don't let him sweet-talk you, Tank. He's just trying to get out of what he's got coming. And just like that, the moment was gone. Tank's face hardened again, and he took another step toward Jake. Nice try, soldier boy, Tank said. But you're not talking your way out of this one. That's when Jake noticed something that changed everything. One of the bikers, a younger guy with tattoos covering both arms, was wearing something that made Jake's blood run cold. Around the man's wrist was a silver bracelet with small charms hanging from it. Jake recognized it immediately. It was a military memorial bracelet, the kind that families wore to remember fallen soldiers. But this one was special. Jake had seen it before on the wrist of his best friend and fellow soldier, Danny Rodriguez. Danny had worn it every single day for the 6 years they had served together. Danny, who had been killed in a roadside bombing 8 months ago. Danny, whose body had been shipped home in a flag-covered coffin. Danny, whose bracelet should have been buried with him or given to his family. Jake's expression changed completely. The calm, peaceful look disappeared, replaced by something much harder and more dangerous. Where did you get that bracelet? Jake asked quietly, his voice carrying a new edge that made several of the bikers take a step back. The young biker looked down at his wrist and grinned. This old thing?
Found it on.
Some dead soldier, a few months back. The words hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. Found it on some dead soldier. The young biker said it so casually, like he was talking about finding loose change on the sidewalk. Jake's vision seemed to narrow, till all he could see was that silver bracelet. Danny's bracelet. The one his friend had worn every single day since his little brother died in Afghanistan 5 years earlier. Danny never took it off, not even in the shower. He said it reminded him why he was fighting, why every mission mattered. Soldier? Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The young biker, who the others called Viper, shrugged like it didn't matter. Some guy on the highway about 8 months ago. Car flipped over near mile marker 47. We got there before the cops did, so we helped ourselves to whatever looked valuable. 8 months ago, mile marker 47. That was exactly where Danny's accident had happened. The official report said he fell, asleep driving home from the base after a 36-hour training exercise. His car went off the road and rolled down a hill. By the time help arrived, he was already gone. But Jake was starting to realize that maybe the official report didn't tell the whole story. You robbed a dead soldier? Jake asked, and something in his voice made all 7 bikers take a step back. He wasn't using it anymore, Viper laughed. Finders keepers, right? Tank noticed the change in Jake's expression and didn't like what he saw. What's it to you, soldier boy? You know this dead guy or something? Jake looked directly at Viper. That bracelet belonged to Sergeant Danny Rodriguez. He was my best friend. We served 3 tours together. The parking lot went quiet again. But this time the silence felt different. Heavier. More dangerous. Bones was the first to speak. Kid, if that's true, then you need to give that bracelet back. Like hell I do, Viper shot back. I found it fair and square. You stole it from a dead American soldier, Bones said, his voice getting angry. That's not finding something. That's grave robbing. Snake stepped between them. Come on, guys. It's just a stupid bracelet. Who cares where it came from? But Jake cared. More than he could put into words, Danny had been more than a friend. He had been like a brother. They had saved each other's lives more times than either of them could count. When Jake got the news about Danny's accident, it had nearly broken him. His little brother Miguel, Jake said, his voice getting stronger. Miguel died in an IED explosion in Kandahar. Danny promised his mother he would wear it until he came home safe. He never got the chance to keep that promise. Touching story, Tank said, but his voice sounded less confident than before. Right. That doesn't change anything. The bracelet stays where it is. Jake looked around the circle of bikers again. But this time, he wasn't looking at them like potential threats. He was looking at them like obstacles between him and something that belonged to his fallen brother. Danny's mother is still alive, Jake continued. She lives in a little apartment in Phoenix, and every day she sits by her window waiting for news about her sons. Both of them are gone now, but she doesn't have anything to remember them by except some old photos and a flag from Danny's funeral. Viper shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't take the bracelet off. That bracelet should be with her, Jake said. It should be with someone who loved Danny, not someone who stole it off his body. We didn't steal nothing, Snake protested. The guy was already dead when we got there. Then why didn't you call the police? Jake asked. Why didn't you try to help? Why'd you take his bracelet and leave him there alone? The question hung in the air like smoke. None of the bikers had a good answer for it, and they all knew it. Bones stepped forward and put his hand on Viper's shoulder. Take it off, kid. Give it back to him. No way, Viper said, jerking away from the older man. You don't get to tell me what to do. I'm not telling you, Bones said quietly. I'm asking. You, soldier to soldier. You're not a soldier anymore, old man, Tank interrupted. That was 40 years ago. These days, you're just another biker like the rest of us. But Bones shook his head. Once a soldier, always a soldier. And soldiers don't steal from the dead. We honor our fallen, no matter what uniform they wore. Jake could see the internal struggle happening within the group. Some of them, like Bones, understood what the bracelet meant. Others, like Tank and Viper, saw it as just another piece of loot from their criminal activities. I'll make you a deal, Jake said suddenly. All 7 bikers looked at him. Give me the bracelet, and I'll get in my truck and drive away. No police, no questions, no trouble for anyone. Tank laughed. You think you're in a position to make deals? There's 7 of us, and 1 of you. Jake nodded. That's true. But there's something else you should know. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet. Inside was his military ID card, but also something else. A business card with an official government seal. I'm not just any soldier, Jake said calmly. I'm a military police investigator. I specialize in crimes against military personnel. The bikers passed the card around, and Jake could see the worry starting to show on their faces. Danny's case was officially closed as an accident, Jake continued. But I never believed that story. A guy who could drive a Humvee through a minefield doesn't just fall asleep and crash on a straight highway. I've been investigating his death on my own time for months. Viper was looking nervous now. So what? You can't prove anything. Maybe not, Jake agreed. But I can make your lives very difficult. I can reopen the case officially. I can bring in federal investigators. I can make sure every law enforcement agency in 3 states knows exactly who you are and what you've been doing. Tank's face was getting red with anger. You threatening us, soldier boy? I'm offering you a choice, Jake said. Give me my friend's bracelet, and this ends here. Keep it, and I promise you that I will spend every day of my leave tracking down everyone who was involved in robbing Danny's body. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Jake could see the bikers looking at each other, weighing their options. They had come here looking for an easy target, someone to push around and humiliate. Instead, they had stumbled into something much more complicated. Bones spoke up again. Tank, we need to think about this. If he's really a cop,
He's
bluffing, Snake said, but his voice didn't sound very confident. Jake pulled out his phone and showed them the screen. 1 phone call, he said. That's all it takes. I call my commanding officer, and by tomorrow morning, you'll have federal agents knocking on your doors. Viper was starting to sweat now. The bracelet suddenly felt very heavy on his wrist. "What's it gonna be?" Jake asked quietly. The 7 bikers looked at each other, and Jake could see that everything was about to change. The tension in the parking lot was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 7 bikers stood in a circle around one soldier. Everyone knew that the next few seconds would determine how this whole situation ended. Viper looked down at the bracelet on his wrist, then back at Jake. The young biker's tough attitude was starting to crack. "You're really a cop?" he asked. Jake nodded. "Military police, trained investigator. Right now you're wearing evidence from an unsolved case." Tank stepped forward, his face still red with anger. "I don't care if you're the president himself. Nobody threatens the Iron Wolves and walks away." But Bones put a hand on Tank's massive arm. "Think about this. Tank, really think about it. This guy's telling the truth. We're not just dealing with some random soldier anymore. We're dealing with a federal investigator who has every legal right to make our lives miserable." "So what?" Snake said, though his voice was shaking slightly. "He's still just one guy." Jake looked at Snake calmly. "One guy with a badge, federa, authority, and a very personal reason to see justice done. The question is, how far do you want to push this?" The gas station's neon lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the faces of everyone in the circle. In the distance, the sound of a truck horn echoed across the highway, reminding them all that the world was still moving while they stood locked in this confrontation. Viper was the first to break. "Look, man, I didn't know it belonged to your friend, okay? I thought it was just some random jewelry." "But now you do know," Jake said quietly. "So what are you going to do about it?" The young biker looked around at his fellow club members, searching for support. But even Snake was starting to look worried, and Tank's anger seemed to be mixing with uncertainty. "If I give you the bracelet," Viper said slowly, "you promise to leave us alone? No cops, no federal agents, no investigations?" Jake considered the question carefully. Part of him wanted to see these criminals pay for what they had done to Danny. But another part of him, the part that just wanted to get home to his daughter, knew that sometimes the smart choice wasn't the same as the satisfying choice. "If you give me the bracelet and tell me exactly what happened that night, I'll consider the matter closed," Jake said finally. Viper looked at Tank, who gave him the smallest nod. The big man clearly didn't like it, but he understood that they were in a bad position. "Okay," Viper said, reaching for the clasp on the bracelet. "But I want your word that this ends here." "You have it," Jake replied. The young biker fumbled with the clasp for a moment, his hands shaking slightly. Finally, the bracelet came free, and he held it out toward Jake. Jake took the bracelet carefully, as if it were made of glass. The silver was tarnished and scratched, but the small charms were still intact. Danny's initials were engraved on one side, and his little brother Miguel's on the other. Jake had seen Danny polish this bracelet 100 times during their deployments. Together. "Now tell me what really happened," Jake said, slipping the bracelet into his pocket. Viper glanced around at the other bikers before speaking. "We were riding back from a party that night. Saw the car off the road already flipped over. The guy was. It was already gone when we got there." "Did you call for help?" Jake asked. "We were gonna," Snake interjected. "But then we heard sirens coming, so we figured someone else already called it in." Jake studied their faces carefully. "So you decided to rob him instead?" "It wasn't like that," Viper protested. "I just saw the bracelet laying there in the dirt, and I thought, what was the point of leaving it there?" "The point," Bones said quietly, "is that it didn't belong to you." Tank had been quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke up. "Fine, the kid gave you back your friend's jewelry. We're done here." But Jake wasn't quite finished. "There's one more thing I need to know. Was Danny already dead when you found him, or was he still alive?" The question hit the group like a physical blow. All 7 bikers looked at each other with expressions that Jake didn't like at all. "What kind of question is that?" Snake asked. "Defensively. The kind that determines whether we're talking about robbery or something much worse," Jake replied. Viper's face had gone pale. "He was already dead, man. I swear on my mother's grave." But Jake had been interrogating suspects for too long not to recognize when someone was lying. "Try again," he said. The parking lot went silent except for the sound of wind rattling the gas stations, metal signs. Jake could see the truth in their faces now, and it was worse than he had imagined. Bones was the one who finally spoke. "The kid's lying," he said quietly. "The soldier was still breathing when we got there." "Shut up, old man," Tank roared. But Bones continued anyway. "He was hurt bad, but he was still alive. Asked us to call for help." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What did you do?" "I wanted to help him," Bones said, his voice breaking slightly. "But the others. He said we couldn't get involved. Said we had warrants out and couldn't risk talking to cops. So you just left him there to die?" Jake asked. "We took his wallet and the bracelet and got out of there," Viper admitted. By the time the cops arrived, he was already gone. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, processing what he had just heard. Danny hadn't died instantly in the crash. He had been alive, probably scared and in pain, asking for help. And these criminals had robbed him and left him to die alone on the side of the road. When Jake opened his eyes again, something had changed in his expression. The calm, controlled look was gone, replaced by something much harder and more dangerous. "You let my best friend die so you could steal his wallet," Jake said, his voice deadly quiet. Tank must have sensed the change because he took a step back. "Now hold on there, soldier boy. We didn't kill anybody." "You might as well have," Jake replied. "If you had called for help immediately, Danny might still be alive today." The bikers were all looking nervous now. They'd expected this to end, with Jake taking the bracelet and leaving. Instead, they had just confessed to something that could land them all in prison. Jake pulled out his phone and started dialing. "What are you doing?" Snake asked frantically. "Calling my commanding officer," Jake said calmly. "I think he needs to hear this story, but you said, double quotes, Viper started. "I said I'd consider the matter closed if you gave me the bracelet and told." "Me what happened?" Jake interrupted. "That was before I knew you let my friend die." Tank stepped forward again, his fists clenched. "Put that phone down or we're going to have problems." Jake looked up at the big man and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "We're already going to have problems," Jake said. "The only question is whether you want to add assaulting a federal officer to your list of charges." That's when the first police sirens became audible in the distance, growing louder by the second. The gas station cashier's call for help was finally paying off. Jake hit the call button on his phone and raised it to his ear. "This is Investigator Jake Wilson," he said, when someone answered. "I need to reopen the Danny Rodriguez case." "I have new evidence and 7 suspects in custody." The bikers looked at each other with dawning horror as they realized their night had just taken a very bad turn.